Hello, lovely beings. JJ Rose here, and today let's talk about Entities 101. I am basically going to go down the entire list of the various entities and kind of give what each one does, how it works, and how all of this works within each other. So, first and foremost, please, please, please do not mess with things you do not understand unless you have a very proper protection measure in place, whether it's a way to ground and clear or whether it's being in a space that's protected, but for you physically as well. Salt baths are wonderful, and I will have a whole other video that will actually discuss protection measures. So if you haven't listened to that one, I would actually ask that you listen to that one before listening to this one, just in case by talking about it, it brings anything up for you. So the way that I look at entities is think about a corporation. You have the people at the top, like the president, the VPs, and the executives. And then you have upper management, and then you have a whole bunch of workers, and then you have lower management, and then you have like the quote unquote grunt workers, right? So same thing when it comes to entities. You have kind of a hierarchy, and I am going to start at the bottom of the hierarchy. I am also going to vacillate between good and bad, or in whatever case you want to say, light and dark. Now, again, all of these were created by source, creator, universe, God, whatever you want to call it. Again, in order to have light, you must have dark, so there is a balance. So that's part of the reason why I've chosen, in order to give the information in a back and forth between light and dark balance, so that I'm not just giving a whole bunch of dark stuff and then pause and then a whole bunch of light stuff, because that's a little bit heavy for me and for you. So I'm going to start off with kind of a very neutral situation that a lot of people have probably seen and or experienced. And this would be a recurring memory loop. Recurring memory loops are basically an energetic deposit in a location that was so strong for whatever reason that it basically left like an imprint on the location. One of these I've heard on the darker end of things have been like in the Lizzie Borden house. There was another home out east where an entire family was slaughtered by someone in the middle of the night with an axe. And I've heard many different people and paranormal investigators have gone in, and all of them have said they've literally seen the whole scene play out over and over. Nothing interacts with them. It's very on its own, and it's kind of like seeing a hologram of like a short video. It's not actually happening. It's just an energetic imprint. Now, on the flip side, I've also heard of some very positive ones where, for instance, in a house that I moved into years ago, one of the first nights, it was so loud, it sounded like someone was having a party. And this went on for about 3 nights, where at night it would sound like there was a full-blown party going on, even though there was no one in the house and it was completely quiet. So what I realized is that was an energetic imprint on the house. There was a party there at one point, and it was very fun, and there were so many people and so many people having such a good time that it left this energetic imprint that just kept playing out. So finally I made peace with it, and we got it to calm down. Now, on the lighter side of things, my personal favorite are Gnoggies. And I have a feeling most people have not heard about these before, or with that name. I'm sure in various different languages and cultures they might have other names. But basically, these are little beings that their job is to eat up negative energy. And they're not neutral. They're definitely on the lighter end of things, but they basically go around and they just gobble up negative energy, whether it's negative energy in a house, like bad thought forms, or, fights and things like that, or whether it's just all out, straight negative energies. These things just kind of gobble them up. They're kind of like little anteaters, if you will. they're kind of hard to describe what they look like, but to me, they kind of look like weird little blobby anteaters. They're very cute, and I appreciate them. Now, on the darker side, we have what's known as parasitic entities. I call them Oogly Booglies because, well, as you can hear from my pronunciation, parasitic is a lovely word. What these are little, on the darker scale of things, entities that their job is basically to latch on to someone or something almost like a tick. And they just basically sit there and they just suck up the negative energy. If you have one, definitely recommend getting it removed, because over time what ends up happening is kind of like a tick or a leech. They can end up sucking so much energy from you that you feel drained. They also tend to, in my experience, put people in a head situation where they no longer want to get help because this thing is feeding off of the negative energy, so therefore it doesn't want you getting help because then it's taking away its food source. They're very low level. They're basically, you can kind of rip them off and throw them away and they go away. So, they're not super intelligent. They just sense dark energy or negative energy and they go and they feed on it. Now, going towards the lighter end of things, we have, passed away family members that come in for a visit. These are, grandma wants to pop in and just say hi, or you smell her perfume, or she pops in a dream, or even if you see her and gives usually a message or sometimes just a smile. These are past relatives or past friends who have passed away, who literally they've already crossed over, they've moved on, they're coming back for whatever reason. They're coming back to either give you comfort, solace, help, guide you in the proper direction, help you along in your path, whatever that may be, or help you even with the situation that you're dealing with that maybe you're stuck in or that you're having a rough time with. The one misconception that I hear the most from different mediums or people who love to go to mediums are that they think the dead are with us all the time. And to be honest, if that were true, if we pass away and literally all we do is hang out around the rest of the living, that is so boring to me, and it sounds like zero growth, and it just, honestly, I'm not dying if that's how it is. So that's how I feel about it. When we pass away and we cross over, you are completely unveiled. You know everything. So even if that person wasn't necessarily like the nicest person when they were alive, when they pass over and they cross completely over and they are unveiled and they are one with spirit again and they have full knowledge, they're not coming back with all their issues. If they are, that would turn into a ghost. I will get there momentarily. But back to a positive, passed on family member, friend, person who's coming to pay a visit. It's usually a wonderful experience. It's usually very heartwarming, endearing, makes you feel good. One example I'll give you of grief, which is why it is so important that we keep our grief in check, is there was a person a very long time ago who had lost her son in a war. And she went into this deep depression to the point she couldn't even get out of bed. I mean, we're talking just her whole life stopped when he passed away. And so one day she's in a room and everyone else kind of left for church that day. And so she's all by herself and she's in a room and she's just sobbing. Why did this happen to me? And why are you gone? And, what could I have done different? And all of a sudden at the end of her bed, she hears like a rustling and she turns around and looks and there's her dead son, complete in uniform, as clear could be. And he looked at her and he said, "Mom, please stop grieving. You're holding me back." And it was at that point she got it. And she released the grief. She saw that he was okay. And she got over her grief and started praying for him and being able to cross over. But it is important to understand that when someone passes away, obviously you're sad. Obviously you love them, but being stuck in that grief for so long can actually hold them back from what they need to do on the other side. So yes, they do come occasionally and they will visit. And if you go see a medium who, knows what they're doing, sometimes they'll pop in and give a message if that's appropriate, but not all times. I have a ton of people in my life who have passed away, and I've never seen them since they've passed, not once. And these are people that, I would think for sure I would get a visit at least once or twice, but nothing. And that's okay, because I look at it as them moving on and them doing what they need to do on the other side, and that makes me happy for them. Now, on the flip side, we have ghosts. And the reason why I put ghosts and people who have passed away that are coming with love and comfort in a very different side of the spectrum is because ghosts are people who have passed away and they refuse to cross over. Now, think about the amount of chutzpah, that's the only word I could think of, that you would have to have in order to be shown that you can fully cross over, be completely unveiled, go to the other side, get your next assignment and move on, and you choose to stay here. That would be someone who is very stubborn and probably pretty angry at their circumstances, which is what I call ghosts. Now, a ghost is usually a passed away person. Again, a lot of negative energy. They're very angry, or they feel like they weren't done. They're very stubborn, and usually it leads to them, like a child, acting out. So you can get ghosts that move stuff around, or they throw stuff, or they become pretty belligerent, or they say, "This is my house, get out." And that's usually the most famous one that we hear about. "This is my house, why are you in here?" A little bit of confusion about, why they're not still alive. In these cases, if you yourself don't feel that you want to confront that, please call in a professional. Usually they can talk to them. Either the ghost will cross over, or you can make a peace treaty, or they can at least get them moved out of your space so that you don't have to be attacked or feel oppressed. Now, let's flip over to the lighter side of things and let's talk about divas, sprites, and then a little bit kind of in the middle, which I would call neutral zone, would be the fae. This would include fairies and gnomes, elves, which I'm going to lump all of these into the fae. I know they're not all the fae. Please don't be upset for people who are very much into the fae, but they're all in the fae realm. So the fae realm, I call it a little more neutral ground because they don't necessarily want to have interaction with humans. They exist on a whole different time frame than us. Not only because they're smaller, but also the way that time works for them is different, which is why you hear a lot of the old stories and the old lore of someone going away with a fairy or an elf, and they think they've been there for a day and they come back and it's like 15 years later. Time moves different for them. In the most part, they really don't interact with humans all that often. I know people who do work with them. If you are directly working with them, please, I advise highly, do not give them sugar. I actually met a woman, had never met her before, but she walked into this room and she was the epitome of like someone walking with just a billion bees going around her, just going nuts. And I'm looking at her and this energy and I'm going, oh my goodness, what is going on? And I end up finding out later that she was working with the fae and she keeps leaving sugar on her counter for them. Well, this woman couldn't find her car keys ever. Her bag kept getting lost. All of her stuff was misplaced. And her friends really started worrying about her and thinking, oh my God, how did you get ADHD this late in life? And I come to find out before the woman started working with the fae, she was actually like the VP of a company and, extremely intelligent and very well moderated and, just a very skilled person in her life, knew where her card keys were type of person and started working with them, giving them sugar, and then everything just kind of careened out of control. So hopefully she's on a little bit better ground. Usually children will see sprites, divas, and the fae. Gnomes are a little more rare. I have seen one once in my life. He really wanted nothing to do with me. I was so excited to see him. But he kind of grunted like, what? Go away. And then he kind of wandered off. And it was quite the experience. But I also understood that, they didn't necessarily want the human interaction. Sometimes when kids are, I would say probably age like 7 and under, they'll see the divas, they'll see the sprites, they'll see the fairies out in the garden or in nature. And usually they're very kind to children for the most part. But again, because they're in a different realm, because they work on a different time scale and a different frequency than us, a lot of the lore about them getting easily offended, things work differently for them than they do for us. So, it would almost like be going to a country that has very rarely seen anyone from the 21st century, and you walking in there and, putting your hand out to shake their hand, and they take that as a symbol of you want to fight them. It's a very different culture, very different time frame, different frequency. So I'm not saying avoid them, but what I am saying is proceed with caution and do your research before you start messing around with things you don't understand. I will continue to say this probably through this entire video. Moving on to the darker side of things, up the ladder a little bit, would be things like goblins or just kind of little nasty bits. There's lots of different words for them. Goblin is the one that I've been hearing the past couple years. Shout out to Hellier. That was a great show that actually started with someone telling them, please come out, we've got this goblin issue, and then led them down a very interesting road. And it is 2 seasons long. I highly recommend if you're into paranormal investigating and if you're into things like this. It was fascinating. I had me riveted. So shout out to Hellier. Thank you so much, you guys, for that content. But goblins basically are, they're a couple levels up on the scale from the bottom on the darker side. They usually do things like they play tricks, they throw rocks, they mess things up, kind of menacing, they're kind of not attractive and show up in windows and try and scare kids and people, especially mess around with animals, which, that hits me in that's a no-no zone. So not a huge fan of them, but they do exist. On the lighter side, we have spirit guides. So spirit guides would be guides who come in either for a short time, for a moment, to come and really help you with your growth and your development. These are positive spirits. They are there to help you. They are there to sometimes wake you up. Most of the time they start very softly, usually by you're just kind of guided towards something, or you're suddenly interested in something that you haven't before, or a song will start playing, something like that. And usually you'll know, okay, maybe that's my spirit guide giving me a little heads up. They're very helpful. They want to help you grow. If you ignore them, they do have limits and they do have senses of humor as well. So usually senses of humor will be like little jokes, like all of a sudden, you want to put on that sad song because you want to brood, and all of a sudden, like the happiest, craziest song comes on and you can't help but laugh. That might be a little joke that they want to play. Lighthearted things like that. If you get to the point where you are all out ignoring them, and shout out to my one dear friend who had this happen to her, where they were speaking to her, she kept ignoring them, and they got a little pushy, and it was because she really needed someone to kind of slap her upside the head and get her to go in the direction that they were screaming at her to do. And so she actually kind of got knocked into a wall, not aggressively, but more like, you need to listen to me, like how a parent would try to almost discipline a child, like, you need to listen. So spirit guides. Now, you do have spirit guides who are there usually in and out of your life your whole time, and then again you will have other ones that come in for short stints. And Sometimes they can be represented by some of the old gods or goddesses. I know some people have said like, oh, I had a dream, or I had this, or I had a spirit guide, or an animal, even animal spirit guides as well. Usually that is to show you, hey, you need to understand or research more about this specific subject to beef yourself up, or to get yourself stronger, or to help you get through whatever you're going through at that time. All right, so next on the list on the darker side would be poltergeists, or as I call them, chaos entities. These are entities that their main job is to disrupt and cause a ruckus, right? Just chaotic little entities. Typically, you will find there is someone going through some sort of hormone issue, whether it be puberty. That used to be the most popular one is, usually there's a teen or a tween in the home or nearby. Sometimes it could be a neighbor in one case, where that entity, because of all the hormones, is just raging, and it gloms on and it feeds off of the chaos, it feeds off of the magic, and it just makes it worse. Usually these little buggers love, for whatever reason, to throw things out of cabinets and fridges in particular. I don't know why food so much is their coup de grace, but let them have it. Not a big fan of these guys. They're irksome. They are very chaotic. They are kind of like a little Tasmanian devil, from the cartoon. Just a little windstorm, right? And they just whip things around. Typically with poltergeists or chaos entities, you do not see them put anything in order. So, we're talking about you come in and the kitchen is just a mess. Like all the pots and pans are just thrown, or laundry is just, thrown all over, or there's just food, looks like a dog went in there and just, went crazy and just started flipping everything out. It is messy. It is not clean. It is not neat. It's not trying to give you a message. It is messy. It is chaotic. Best way to tame these bad boys typically is to have a talk with whoever it is directly coming from and get that person more stable. Now, the reason why I say hormone issues and not just teens or tweens is because there are a lot of people with hormone imbalances. And that can happen usually at any point in life. So I have seen these things crop up with people who are in their 30s or 40s, or even in their 50s, women going through menopause, or in one case, it was someone who had a thyroid condition that was affecting their, hormone levels besides just the thyroid, because everything is so connected in our bodies. And that in itself was just something this little bugger came in and was feeding off of. And then, of course, they get all hyphy, for lack of a better word, and then just cause chaos. So that's why I call them chaos entities. Poltergeist is typically the word that you would find out and about in the world. If there is one of these in the home, this is when you want to be on high alert. And the reason I say that is because now we're about to go up the triangle into the upper management and upper workers on the scale. And so poltergeists are usually, I would call them like your middle scale worker bees, right? They're getting in there, they're causing chaos, they're feeding off chaos and causing even more chaos, and then they're opening a door. So this is the reason why, if there is one manifesting, hopefully get rid of it before it gets highly aggressive. So this doesn't necessarily mean that, the person who it's linked to needs to get on hormone therapy or anything. This is more of making them aware, hey, we need to talk about some ways for you to ground, or outlets for you to get out some of this crazy energy of all these things happening in your body in a healthier way, so that this thing doesn't have a food source anymore, and then hopefully get someone to clear it out. Whether it's professional or whether you guys want to do it yourself, that is up to you. But please, please, please remove these guys if possible, because they do, like I said, open a door. And with that door, let's go into middle management, which is shadow people. So, shadow people, I've tried to do a lot of research out there just to see what's going on, because when I say shadow people, I mean one thing, and then I hear all these stories and they're very much talking about something else. So for my little triangle, I have put shadow people on both ends, both good and bad. So on the bad scale, shadow people are interdimensional beings, okay? And when someone is seeing them manifest in a location, and they are, I mean, you could feel if something doesn't like you. You get that feeling, right? It's not a good feeling, like, oh, that thing, the good shadow people, the ones that I'm typically able to see or have more experience with, they kind of like peek around a corner, like, oh, there's a person there. And then they go back. Or they're just kind of walking around and we kind of look at each other strangely. Honestly, I feel like that's just another dimension or another frequency. And for whatever reason, like, we're able to see each other. And in all honesty, on their end, they're probably in color and we're in shadow. So they're seeing us, we're seeing them, but there's nothing malignant about it. It's more of a, like, what are you? And they're thinking the same thing about us because they're living on another plane of existence. And all of a sudden, we're walking by them, probably looking in shadow. So those are the good ones that I'm used to seeing. But of course, I've scoured the internet and to make sure that I'm using the right verbiage, because some of my verbiage is very old and people aren't using these terms anymore. But I hear of the darker end of the shadow people, which it doesn't feel good. It feels scary. This feels like something with malice behind it, and it's glaring at you. I've heard reports of some people saying these shadow people had colored eyes, like yellow or red. That for me typically gets into something else, but I understand and respect that that's what's out there. So I'm just going to call it a negative shadow person. But again, interdimensional being, they're coming from another frequency. The darker end of things, they don't like you. They don't want you to like them. It feels very dark. It feels menacing. It feels angry. It feels uncomfortable. The nicer end of shadow people, again, are just, it would almost be like walking down the street and someone else is walking down the street too. And you guys glance at each other like, okay, that's kind of weird. And then you turn back, like when you weren't expecting someone to be there. All right, so moving on up. Now we have kind of middle management. And we have, and I'm just going to call them dark entities, okay? They're not full-on demons. They are dark entities. These are able to manifest in various different ways. Usually these are the things that make the 3 knocks, or they are scraping, or making the claw marks, making you feel very uncomfortable and oppressed in the location. They are not nice. They definitely like to make themselves be known, and they feed off of fear and negativity, and they will actually do things to produce more fear and negativity. So whether that is, seeing something in the middle of the night or things moving on their own, this will be a situation where you are scared and you are feeling angry about it, but not angry in the fact that you want to do something about it. You're just angry to be angry. A lot of times, again, I've scoured the internet and watched a lot of different shows so that I'm using the right terminology, but in some of the cases, I've seen them manifest with couples where the couple moved into a place, everything was great, and then all of a sudden, they start hearing these knocks or the raps or, claw marks, and things are moved, and things are moved in order. So because these are up the scale, unlike the poltergeist chaos entities where they're just chaotic, these things are like spelling things out, or they're making things disrupting whatever you have. Like, let's say you had, a bunch of stuff on your counter. They're arranging it into some weird form so that it freaks you out, so that it has intelligence behind it, basically. And that's what it wants to show you. I'm intelligent. I don't like you. I'm here and I want to make you scared and angry. And if you guys can fight with each other or have a lot more disruption in your life, all the better, because that's what these things like to do. Now, when I talked about poltergeist and chaos entities opening a door, that's what they're opening a door for, are these dark entities. Or dark shadow people, dark entities, depending on the terminology and the situation. Sometimes they're interchangeable because dark entities can look like shadow people. They can also manifest themselves to look like ghosts. They can also manifest themselves to look like, different hallucinations. One story that I saw was like all of a sudden this like big dark dog started running down their hall and they didn't have a dog. But of course that would freak you out, right? Like you're walking down your hall, you don't have a dog. Now there's this big black dog with red eyes, running at you. Things like that. They are upper, not highest, but they are upper echelon. They are there to basically set the footwork and the grounds for an even bigger opening, which would be a demonic attack. I will get there momentarily, but on the flip end, from dark entities, I want to go over to the lighter end of things and talk about helpful spirits. So helpful spirits aren't necessarily human. These are different spiritual entities. They're not angels, but they are helpful spirits, and they are there in order to help you. Usually they feel very alien, and I don't mean like aliens, but I mean they feel foreign to you. And so it's not like, oh, that's my grandma. It's just, it feels warm. It feels loving. It feels compassionate. It feels empathetic. It sometimes will, put a song on, or all of a sudden, a book falls off the shelf and it's just a really good book that can help you out with something you're going through. These entities also will come in if you need help. Like if you are being oppressed by a dark entity or chaos entity or one of the other Oogly Booglies, they can sometimes come in and, kick a little rump for you and help you out and get those things out. They're not necessarily angels because they're not of that high echelon, but they're helpful spirits. Funny story about this that I thought I'd just interject here to lighten the mood a little bit. I had someone in my life who had this dream, and they walked up to this pavilion and there were all these people there. And some of them they recognized as their family, but some of them they didn't recognize at all. And they couldn't even tell you if they were human or not. They were just beings and they were there. And everyone was having a good time. And afterwards, they're telling me about it. And I said, well, that was you meeting your spirit team. And they pause for a second and they go, that's a lot of people. And that made me smile, because if we truly knew how many different spirits and beings are helping us and that have our back and that are trying to get us to advance and to do the work that we need to do, whatever your job is, or jobs, because most of us have many in this world, and to help you along, I think we would all just sit there and cry in gratitude. It is so marvelous. And I know that I'm so blessed and lucky to be able to know more than, of this than the average person, perhaps. But honestly, it is so beautiful. Each and every one of you have an entire team working for you, working for your advancement, for your growth, for you to do whatever it is that you came to this world to do, on all different levels. So just take a moment and really think about that and appreciate that. I just think that's so special, and I wanted to share that with you. So moving along to the next one up the hierarchy, I kind of stuck this one in because it's both good and bad depending on how it's being used. But let's talk about the old gods. And the reason why I put them on both is because I've heard some people feel very negative when they've had some of these experiences with an old god. For the most part, with most of the old gods, even the scary ones, for the most part, they were there also to teach a lesson. So there's also, on the good spectrum, the old gods. Now, are they still in existence? Yeah. Yeah, there are gods and goddesses. Obviously, there's source, creator, universe, God, who is at the top. But the old gods were basically just really powerful beings who had specific purposes that they were either during a time period they were helping the people with, and or just over time that people understood and knew about. And they all had different attributes. So if you're having a dream and all of a sudden like Odin comes into your dream, I would definitely recommend looking into Odin if you know nothing about it. What was he all about? What could this dream be telling me? And more often than not, you're going to find a benefit. You're going to find usually like, okay, I might be going through a really rough time, and he came, specifically to tell me like, hey, put your armor on, like we're going to war. A few years ago, I personally was doing a meditation and went in and, saw my different spirit guides, and I asked specifically if anyone wanted to come in and had a message for me. And now I'm seeing this man, and he's on a bench, and he's turned away from me, and he turns towards me, and these eyes, the most insanely beautiful blue eyes that I've ever seen. It's totally something spiritual, because that doesn't even exist in reality. So I ask him, hi, who are you? And he basically shows me this scene, and the scene plays out where anyway, it was this whole scene. I won't even go into it. But basically, this whole scene of different images plays out, and he looks at me like, do you get it? And I look at him and I say, I'm so sorry. I still have no clue who you are. I don't even know what you just showed me. And then he showed me kind of like a Viking hat. And I'm like, okay, so you're from the Viking area. I understand that. And, so at that point, I only knew like 3 or 4 Viking gods. And this was years ago. And so I asked, are you this? Are you that? Nope. And he kept shaping his head. And so finally I said, okay, let me take a minute. Let me jump out real quick, and I'm going to Google. So I get on Google and I'm looking up, Nordic Viking gods at this point. And none of them matched what this man looked like. None of them matched what he showed me in this story. And so I found this one page, and I wish I could quote it, but unfortunately it was years ago and I don't have it anymore. But it listed out every single Nordic god and their different attributes, what they looked like, what they did, and kind of like their story. So I'm on page 5 of this at this point, and no one is matching. So I just scrolled to the very, very bottom of the page, and I find this god called Tyr, Tyr. And I read, and the way that he looked and everything that he showed me was his backstory. And so, okay, close out Google, jump back into the meditation, and I said, are you Tyr? And he nodded his head. And I said, oh, I'm kind of verklempt over here. I don't know what to say. Like, I'm truly honored that you came to visit me, but I have no clue why you're here. And he put out his hand, for me, and I took his hand, and he said, it's okay, daughter. When the time comes, you will understand. And I totally got all verklempt right there. Can you tell? And it was so beautiful and just so loving, that experience for me. And I felt so taken care of and so loved and so humble as well, that, here this old god that I've never even heard of at that time, is coming to pay me a visit. And so I start researching into him a little bit more, and back at the time with this, there wasn't a ton out there on the internet about him. And so I threw it past one of my friends, who luckily is very open like I am. And I said, hey, I've never had an experience like this. You know more about this than I do. What do you get from this? And she goes, oh, he's prepping you like for a war. Like it sounds like he's prepping you for something big that's going to be happening. And he's letting you know, like, I got your back. And a couple months later, something ended up happening to me and it was huge. And I have to say that not only with me personally, but also what was happening in the world at the time was humongous. And, the story goes on from there. I'm going to kind of just stop there because of the time period, and I don't want to get into what ended up happening in the world during it. But let's just say, again, it just showed me how brilliant and how blessed all of us are to have so many on our spirit team that are here to help us. And it also opened me up to read on some of these. I mean, I had never even looked into anything Viking or Nordic before, really, ever, because it just wasn't in my periphery. But I ended up finding some really cool shows off of it, and American Gods was one of those shows. If you have a chance to watch that, if you haven't, it's really cool. It is very much not real, but it is one heck of a ride, and the book was even better. Again, just trying to lighten it up. So now I'm going to go into the big kahunas, and on the darker side will be demons. So for the most part, I think we've all heard the word. We're all pretty familiar with what it is. But demons and angels, these are upper echelon, very high, interdimensional beings. Now, demons and angels have, of course, there's the whole, they all were angels and then they fell. But let's talk about demons in specific. These are upper echelon, interdimensional beings that work for the adversary. So this is their job, okay? Their job is to be adversarial towards you, meaning not your friend, okay? They do not just pop up willy-nilly, okay? You don't use a Ouija board once and then all of a sudden you're stuck with a demon for life. That is absolutely absurd and ridiculous. But I don't recommend messing around with Ouija boards unless you fully understand how to close it out and you have protection. That being said, just because something goes bump in the night doesn't mean you have a demonic infestation. These guys take a long time to be drawn in, and they're usually coming in because there is a specific reason, not just because you were bad in second grade that one time. No. They have very specific jobs. And the reason why I'm being so emphatic on this is because, I've seen so many shows where everything goes to, I heard the 3 knocks, it's a demon, or it's this, they're not that prevalent, right? So if you are truly dealing with one and or someone is, and there's a possession and or there's an infestation or an oppression, this is a big deal. And it does not happen willy-nilly for no reason. They are very high on the strata, and they're not looking for just anybody and everybody. They are there for a purpose. And again, the purpose is adversarial. It's not for the good, but I believe that good can come from everything. So if, unfortunately, you've known someone, let's say, who was possessed or who was oppressed or had an infestation, I'm sure that had a huge impact on you, didn't it? For you seeing that. I'm sure that that is profound and in your mind and may have led to you opening up spiritually or getting faith or, starting to reach out to churches and or, spiritual or psychics or whatever it was, and sent you down probably a whole different path than if you had never been exposed to that. Now, it sounds like I'm giving them a lot of cred, and yes, I am, because they do deserve respect. They are upper echelon. They have a job to do. Part of my job is entity and exorcisms, and these are not fun. I would not wish that on anyone. And I know that in every case that I've had to deal with where there actually was a demonic presence there, and either it was removed and or, cleared, that every single person, all it be me and all the other witnesses, the people that the person or, situation was in, everyone was affected. And again, it's affected for the better, even though their job is to be dark and evil. So I personally wouldn't want to mess with them. I wouldn't want to call them. I wouldn't want to work with them, but I give them respect where respect is due. They're there to do a job. And now let's talk about some telltale signs of how I know it's a demon versus a dark entity or a ghost or an oogly boogly. So with demons specifically, there's usually a scent of sulfur, rotten eggs, or like a very strong, disgusting body odor where there should be none of that scent in that space. The and again, I'm a logical person, so please rule out physical things before you just go jumping into it's a demon. If you haven't taken your trash out in 2 weeks and it's been hot and stuffy and it's gross, yeah, take your trash out. That's what you got to do, okay? Air the house out. If, you have a teenage son who plays sports and he hasn't aired his room out in, weeks, and all of a sudden, you wonder, like, why is this horrible scent? It's probably his clothes. Like, open a window, do all of the normal things you need to do in order to rule it out. I had one situation where in my house, I was with someone, we came home, I saw this thing on my porch. It went away. We went into my house. We had been there 2 hours beforehand. The house smelled absolutely fine. I am very, very clean and I air my house out often. And all of a sudden the house smelled like rotten eggs. And I mean, the best way to call it was like dirty feet. It was just disgusting. The whole house. So, of course, this person goes right into, I know what you saw and, it's got to be that. And I'm like, hold up. So I made them walk around with me. We put our head in every trash can. We put our head near every sink to make sure it wasn't coming out of the pipes, because that can happen, right? And we ruled all of that out before I went there. Now, yes, obviously, I'm able to tell probably a little faster than the average person, but I say this because a lot of people just want to jump to conclusions, and let's be logical. Roll all that stuff out first and then go into the spiritual. Other things that you can tell when it's an actual demon: a very heavy, oppressive energy. The air feels like it's weighted. It's an intense fear. Any who sense or witness it, I mean, we're talking intense fear. We're not talking about that was scary, it made me jump for a moment like the dark entities can do and ghosts or shadow people. We're talking about like, I feel like I'm going to tinkle in my pants. Bright red or bright yellow eyes seen either with or without a body. These can also be indicators that it's a demon. Now, the reason why I get a little wonky on that is because I've seen some people say shadow people had red or yellow eyes. Well, of course, demons, they can appear whatever way they want to. They can shapeshift. I personally abhor when they come looking like children, because that's just awful. But again, their job is to get the most bang for the buck, right? So if they can freak you out by looking like a, demonic child, that's what they're going to go with. Or if your fear more is, a giant spider or something else, they're going to go for the jugular. That's what they do. When they speak, they know things that no one could possibly know. This is when you know you're dealing with something higher echelon. On the good and the bad. Angels, the same thing. They're going to be able to talk about things that no one would know, whether it's a personal thing in your life or a situation or something like that. Both of them, both angels and demons, can speak in other languages or any language they want to. Why supposedly demons always want to talk in Latin is kind of beyond me, but do you. When a person is afflicted, okay, can be oppressed or possessed. This is when you will see or hear their eyes went black. And I'm not talking about the narcissist thing. I know there's a lot online about that, or psychopaths. This is almost different. Their eyes are not human anymore. I actually have seen one case where the person has beautiful blue eyes. I mean, those crystal blue eyes. and their eyes literally looked black to me. And other person who saw it said the same thing. When a person is possessed, they do not smell and act the same as when they were them. Okay. They also make strange sudden movements that the afflicted person normally wouldn't make. Almost like tics, and everything is like exaggerated. I do have to say Hollywood has done a wonderful idea with making this, like the whole girl where she moves all kind of robotically in that in some of the scary movies. Yes, that's very much true. I personally have had one situation where a person was possessed. This person actually was in a wheelchair. They couldn't walk. They could not even really stand up on their own. And if they did, it took them, like a good 20 minutes. And I had this person literally fly out of their wheelchair and run across the room and get in my face. So yeah, that's a telltale sign of possession. Dark entities, shadow people, poltergeists, they typically are not possessing because they can attach, but attachment is different than possessing, because attachment is more they're on you, they're kind of messing with your thought process, whereas possession is full blown, they have your body. Once again, why I don't let anything in my body. Now, if it is an actual and true demon, please, 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 even if you think you are strong, if you have never dealt with this before, call in reinforcements. Even if you're phoning a couple friends saying, hey, I'm about to try and take care of this myself, and they're praying for you or holding space for you or sending white light, whatever it is that they do that you're comfortable with, I recommend that. I also recommend having witnesses when it happens, because a one-on-one battle with a demon can be very rough. And it's usually best if you have other people there, because they can also point out what they're seeing and what they're sensing, so that you're not just, sometimes they can get in your mind and they can make you see and feel and hear things that aren't necessarily true. So for protection, I do not recommend going in it alone. There are demonologists, there are paranormal investigators that you can call. Normally they want to get it on tape, but if it's something that you just want gone, I highly recommend that if you've known it's ticked all the boxes, you know what you're dealing with, whoever it is that you're calling, whether it be a psychic, a paranormal investigator, tell them in advance that you feel it is a demon, and let them make an educated choice if they want to help you or if they want to refer you out. I do know of a couple paranormal investigators that have said they will absolutely not deal with anything if it's demon related. And I know some psychics that have said that too, because they know that they're not equipped for it. And for that, I say thank you and more power to you. Let that be handled by someone who is strong enough. And trust me, the strong people will know. Like, it's not something you want to enter into that battle not being prepared for. Even in talking about this, I personally have to be careful, because in discussing things like this, it can bring things close in, which is why I'm glad I have the pause button for this recording, because I've had to deal with a couple things. Ways that you can at least calm or stop the oppression, if indeed it is this, until someone can get there and to help, would be have a religious text open. If it's the Bible, Torah, Quran, whatever it is, open it up, have it open. Prayer, or having something that you feel is positive and heartwarming playing. So if you like, church music, put that on. If you like just a super happy, wonderful song, anything happy, loving, and joyous, they're not going to like. And you can, luckily with all the mixed media that we have nowadays, we have, 800 ways that we can play songs. One couple was having some issues, and I told them to put Gregorian chants on. And they had those basically playing on a loop until I was able to physically get there and take care of the situation. Now, let's say you suspect it could be a demon, but you're not 100% sure yet because it kind of hasn't appeared so much with all of the hocus pocus and the, sulfur and talking all weird and all that. So, some of the things that can happen when they're around and when they're starting to infiltrate is you could see, the afflicted person just all of a sudden has like an inexplicable run of either bad luck or their life just takes like a total downward spiral, and there's nothing that this person has specifically done to cause this. I'm talking about someone who's, always shown up for work, great attendance, good worker, they managed their money right, and all of a sudden they've lost their job for absolutely no reason that makes sense. They've had an accident that's like a 1 in a million chance. Their behavior starts changing. Financially things are happening. Again, it's almost like an abusive relationship where, the abuser wants to get the abusee into an isolated situation. If you're not religious, and that's not the route you want to go, that's fine. Again, just be open with whoever it is that you're going to call in for help on this. I do understand that the Catholic Church, first, I think you have to be Catholic. And I think second, they usually send a lot of priests out in order to kind of check around before they'll just jump in and start dealing with it. Paranormal investigators usually are a great place to start. And the reason why I say that is because they're free and they don't really have a vested interest in it. So, they want to get something on tape, obviously, but if they personally don't want to do an investigation and or have someone on their team to clear it, they more than likely will have contacts who can help you. And so that would be a really good place maybe to start to get a referral if it's something you just want taken care of and you don't want people coming in there and studying it. I just want it gone, is to call a paranormal investigator and see if they have a referral for someone to come in and take care of it. Now, I want to talk about something happy and end on a wonderful foot because unfortunately, talking about all this, I'm going to need to clear my house out about 18 times over. So, angels, yay! These are high echelon interdimensional beings that work for Source, Creator, God, whatever you want to call it, and they are there to help and to do good. They are huge. Angels don't just show up willy-nilly. If an angel shows up, it has a very specific job to do. Now, that job could be getting, something dark away from you. That job could be saving you. I understand that in Joplin, where the huge tornado was, that there's a whole bunch of reports from kids about what they were calling the butterfly people, which were basically like these huge angels just watching out for various people and making sure that they weren't hurt, which I think is amazing. And I also think it's wonderful because there were so many of these stories and so many adults were there that were actually able to say like, yes, this happened and no, we cannot explain it. And I thought that was brilliant and so wonderful. My few encounters with angels usually have been, I needed some really hefty backup for, something that I was working on clearing, and they popped in to help. When I say they are giant, I don't even think we as humans are even able to understand how huge, like a skyscraper doesn't even cut it. I had one situation where I was very concerned about someone, and I was praying and I was crying. And the only word I could say in my prayer, because I was crying so hard for this person, was help, just help. And all of a sudden I felt this huge presence. And I was alone in my home at the time. And I felt this humongous presence. I mean, when I say huge, I mean massive. And I'm thinking, what in the world? And it was so comforting and so absolutely wonderful. And joyous isn't even doing it enough justice of the words that I'd like to describe. But it was so wonderful, beautiful, comforting, safe. I mean, I felt love, but that was a whole other level of being loved. It was kind of like when tear popped in, just this absolute love that I felt. And I remember coming out and I saw, basically, I was able to see up into the toe, and that was craning my neck all the way up. I couldn't even see the top of the foot. That's how big this being was. And it was an angel. And I have to tell you, I went from, being an emotional mess to joyous and happy and comforted in a snap second when that happened. It was beautiful. So yes, they exist. Yes, they're wonderful. We all have guardian angels, obviously. I'm talking about the what I guess society would call them archangels and things of that nature. Those are the real big boys. But they're all giant because that's their job. Their job is to be for the light, for the good, and to help. But again, they're not coming around willy-nilly like, oh, God, please help me find my keys, and an angel appears. I mean, you probably have a helpful spirit coming, and if they need to appear angelic-like to you in order for you not to freak out for the help, then that's probably how they're going to come. But for the most part, true angels at the upper top, those are coming in to help, and to help with big situations. I sure do hope that all of you have enjoyed listening to this. Again, I am going to try to put timestamps. And if there are specific entities that people want me to talk more about or experiences of, I'm more than happy to do that. On this, I really just wanted to kind of give a little bit of information about the hierarchy on both sides of the spectrum, as well as kind of what I call neutral ground, and just a little intro. Hopefully it was fascinating. Hopefully this is good information, and I hope to see or hear from you all again in the future. Thank you again so much for joining me today.